Hi, today I want to tell you about Loot, a platform that lets you unlock the value of player-owned assets. I'm Brett Kolodny, a recent university grad, and my teammate Tony is a senior cloud developer at IBM. So what's the problem? On traditional game platforms, players don't actually own their assets. And while blockchain solutions can solve this problem, they're incredibly niche and difficult to use. And even if you get your platform up and running, now you're stuck on the network and its limitations. For example, high fees and network congestion like we've seen on Ethereum can undermine all of your efforts. The solution is Loot, a blockchain that is both easy to use and also free and open. We have developed two key products for making this possible: a dedicated blockchain specific for in-game assets and a software suite for interacting with our blockchain that is easy and simple to use. Loot is built with Substrate as a standalone chain and is highly optimized to keep fees and congestions to a minimal, scale for millions of users, upgrade seamlessly over time, and has royalties baked into transactions for game asset creators. With the goal of becoming a Polkadot parachain, Loot will be able to interact with other chains on the network, increasing the scope of what assets are available. But game developers aren't blockchain engineers, and they shouldn't have to understand blockchain. They just need to use crypto assets in their games. Loot offers two pieces of software for interacting with our blockchain. For developers, there's the Loot Studio. Easily create game assets with a click of a button, manage assets, and track analytics of those assets. We also have a robust and easy to use API for integrating Loot assets into their games. We want game developers to stay game developers, not become blockchain engineers. For the user, we have Loot Chest, a place for users to store their game assets with an integrated asset marketplace. Let's see these in action. So with Loot Studio, we have a drag and drop functionality for creating game assets. All you have to do is fill out a couple fields, and with the click of a button, your assets are on the chain. Create and track game assets all in one place. Now let's see the user side of things. In Loot Chest, users can buy game assets that are in an integrated marketplace. We want the experience to closely mimic existing platforms. Users can also update their on-chain identity as if it were their username on another platform. Heading over to the game, we can launch it straight through the Loot Chest. And with our API, all of this information is in the game with just a few extra lines of code. So what's in store for Loot? We want to launch Loot as a parachain in order to gain access to the entire Polkadot ecosystem. We would like to integrate with chains like Akala for the use of their stablecoin. A stablecoin on Loot would further streamline the user experience so that users don't have to worry about native token prices. And finally, we're looking to implement Ethereum chain integrations so existing crypto users can get their assets onto Loot. Thank you for listening. If you want to learn more, check out our website at lootsolutions.netlify.app. Thank you.
Awesome, Brett. Thank you very much. Now, the slightly awkward time of any questions from the judges. I think we've managed to unmute you all, but please do raise your hand if you haven't been unmuted. But judges, any questions from you?
How do you think about go-to-market? What's the best way to get some liquidity onto Loot?
The best way to get liquidity? So I think that the plan would be to have a native token on Loot as a base point. But like I mentioned before in our presentation, I think the end goal would be to have some sort of stable coin on Loot as well, so that users who are buying in-game assets don't have to worry about things like native token prices going up and down, and thus the price of assets going up and down.
Awesome. Judges, any other questions at all?
Yeah, have you thought about like what are the trade-offs between Loot and other dedicated platforms like Flow, for example?
So I'm not familiar with Flow, but if Flow is an Ethereum-based platform, I think one of the issues there is just the network congestion and fees that we've talked about before. The goal with Loot would be to automatically bring those down. And then with parachain integration and bridges to Ethereum, we could still leverage all of the different capabilities of other platforms as well.
Awesome.
This was really cool to see. Thank you for sharing. I'd be curious if you could dig in like a couple more steps on that. Like, why did you decide to go with the sort of application specific chain or like parachain type architecture versus like just starting with Ethereum, where a lot of the big NFTs and collectibles are right now?
So the idea behind Loot is specifically to cater to game developers. We want the most streamlined experience for a game developer, to the point where they're not even exactly they don't have to be cognizant of the fact that they're using a blockchain. And building on things like Ethereum doesn't let it give us the same level of the same low-level capabilities to have that streamlined experience be possible.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question in the spirit of keeping things moving. Any other questions, judges?
One last point was that I wanted to understand was have you interacted with any, I guess, indie game developers and just thinking about potentially working with like assets from Unity or things that they kind of already have on board so that they can get those on Loot.
So the way that assets would be deployed to Loot is kind of up to the game developer themselves. What's actually being deployed onto the Loot network could be an image of an asset, so something that you would see in a marketplace. It could also be an actual asset itself being pulled from the something like IPFS. The idea behind Loot is less so storing of assets on chain and more so just knowing who owns what assets, if that answers your question.
I see.
And our API integration is using a REST API, meaning that every single game engine that I've checked has easy capabilities of interacting with that. So pulling your assets and finding out what assets a user owns in a game is incredibly straightforward.
Sure. That makes sense. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.